The sound of monitors filled the room. Beep, beep, beep. A slow, uncertain rhythm echoing against the sterile walls of St. Joseph's Hospital. Under the harsh white light, a woman in her 40s lay unconscious. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow. Doctors whispered in the background, words like hypoglycemia, unstable, overdose. Dr. Harper leaned over the bed, his eyes focused and calm, his gloved hands steady. "Come on, Melissa," he whispered. "Stay with me." For a moment, the heart monitor flattened into silence. Then, beep. A pulse. Weak, but there. 2 weeks earlier, Melissa Turner was not a patient. She was a teacher. 46 years old, loved by her students, the kind of woman who remembered birthdays and carried extra pens in her purse, just in case. But when the bell rang and the classrooms emptied, Melissa felt the weight of another kind of silence, the one that lived at home. Greg, her husband, waited for her in the kitchen. The smell of disinfectant clung to the air. He'd just wiped the counter again. He always wiped things. "How was work?" he asked without looking up from his tablet. "Busy," she said, forcing a smile. "I stayed after class to help." He interrupted, tapping the screen. "You're late for your shot." She hesitated. "I can do it later, after dinner." He sighed. "Melissa, we've talked about this. You need to stay on schedule. You want to get better, don't you?" His tone was soft, but sharp, a question with only one right answer. "I do," she said quietly. He took the injector pen from the refrigerator, already loaded with the weekly GLP-1 dose. The new miracle drug, he called it. "See, this will fix everything." She looked at the needle, small but menacing. "It makes me sick sometimes." That's how you know it's working. At her next appointment, Dr. Harper reviewed her chart. Her glucose levels were inconsistent, sometimes too high, sometimes dangerously low. He glanced at her over the clipboard. "How are you feeling, Melissa?" She smiled politely. "Tired, a little dizzy. Are you following the dosage exactly as prescribed?" Before she could answer, Greg spoke. "Of course she is. I take care of that for her." Harper's eyes shifted between them. "Does she inject herself?" Greg's smile was tight. "She's not good with needles." Melissa looked down. Her silence said more than words ever could. Later that afternoon, Dr. Harper recorded a private note in her file. Patient reports weakness and fatigue. Weight loss more rapid than expected. Suspect dosing error or external interference. Will monitor closely. He'd seen it before, not with insulin, but with control. The kind of control that didn't heal. It suffocated. At home, Melissa sat by the window, watching rain fall against the glass. She remembered when Greg used to take photos of her, back when she still laughed without apology. Now he took pictures of the scale instead. Every Sunday morning, every pound lost, every ounce documented. That night, she tried to skip her shot. She hid the injector under a towel in the bathroom, but when she returned to the kitchen, Greg was already holding it. "You forgot this," he said. "I was going to—" He grabbed her wrist gently, but firmly. "You said you wanted this. Don't change your mind now." She stared at him, the reflection of the needle trembling in her eyes. A few days later, she collapsed in her classroom. Students screamed. Desks scraped the floor. When she woke up, she was surrounded by white coats and machines. Dr. Harper's face came into focus above her. "Melissa, can you hear me?" Her lips moved, but no sound came. He looked at her chart again. Glucose at critical low. Dehydration, hormonal imbalance. Too much medication, too little body left to handle it. When Greg arrived at the hospital, Harper met him in the hallway. "She's stable, but we need to talk about her medication," the doctor said. Greg frowned. "You think this is about her treatment? She's been following your plan." Harper crossed his arms. "My plan, Mr. Turner, does not include doubling doses or skipping meals. Her blood sugar levels suggest interference." Greg's eyes darkened. "Are you accusing me of something? I'm asking if you've been adjusting her doses." "That's ridiculous. Then you won't mind if we run a toxicity screen on the samples from her injector." For a brief second, Harper saw it. That flicker of panic in Greg's eyes before he turned and walked away. Inside the hospital room, Melissa stirred weakly. Through the blur, she saw Harper sitting beside her, his voice low and calm. "You're safe here. he said. "I promise." Her eyes filled with tears. "He'll be angry." "Not anymore," Harper said gently. "This time, he doesn't get to decide what happens to you." The machines beeped softly, steady and rhythmic, like a heart learning to trust again. Morning light filtered through the blinds, painting thin lines across the white sheets. Melissa's eyes fluttered open. Her mouth was dry, her body heavy. She didn't remember the ambulance, the IV, or the oxygen mask, only the cold floor of her classroom and a student's voice crying, "Ms. Turner, please wake up." Now the world was quiet, except for the slow rhythm of machines keeping time. Dr. Harper stood near the window, reviewing her chart. When she stirred, he turned and smiled gently. "Good morning. You scared everyone." Melissa's voice was soft. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize for surviving." He adjusted her drip, his movements calm, deliberate. "You're stable now, but your blood work tells me something important. Someone's been increasing your dose." Her breath caught. "Increasing?" He nodded. "The level in your system is 3 times what I prescribed." Her mind raced. "Maybe I did it wrong. Maybe—" "Melissa." He interrupted softly. "You didn't." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Her eyes filled with tears. Later that day, Greg appeared at the hospital, his face the perfect mask of concern. "I just want to see my wife," he told the nurse. Dr. Harper intercepted him in the hallway. "She needs rest," Harper said. "No visitors right now." Greg's smile tightened. "I'm her husband." "And I'm her doctor," Harper replied, holding his ground. "If you truly care about her, let her rest." For a moment they stood in silence, 2 men, one wearing authority, the other wearing guilt. Greg turned away, muttering, "You're overstepping." Harper didn't move. "Maybe, but not as much as you did." Inside her room, Melissa stared at her reflection in the dark monitor screen. Pale skin, tired eyes, and a faint mark on her arm where Greg had held her last. It wasn't a bruise, not exactly, more like a fingerprint left on the sole. When the nurse entered to check her vitals, Melissa whispered, "Can I have my phone?" "It's with your husband," the nurse said kindly. "He turned it in when you were admitted." Melissa looked away. Of course he did. That night, Harper reviewed the injector pen found in her purse. The dosage dial was twisted past the safety limit. He examined the fingerprints, multiple sets, confirmed by the lab. He leaned back in his chair, exhaustion setting into his bones. How many patients had he treated for illness when the real disease was the person sitting beside them? He typed a note into the system. Suspected case of medical coercion and dosage tampering. Recommend social services intervention and restricted visitation rights. Then, after a pause, he added, "Patient unaware of full extent. Proceed with empathy." The next morning, Melissa woke to find a tray of food, oatmeal, fruit, a small note taped to the cup of tea. "Eat something. H." She smiled faintly, the first real smile in days. Dr. Harper entered a few minutes later. "I figured you'd ignore the breakfast unless I guilt-tripped you." "I'm a teacher," she said softly. "Guilt works on me." He chuckled. "Good. Then we're both professionals." Her laughter faded quickly. "I don't know what happens now." He pulled up a chair. "You heal, and you learn that what happened to you isn't your fault." She stared at the floor. "He said he just wanted to help, that he was doing what I couldn't." Harper's tone turned firm but gentle. That wasn't help. That was control disguised as care. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I should have known." "You couldn't," he said. "Abuse doesn't announce itself. It whispers until you believe it's love." By the 3rd day, her strength began to return. She walked short distances down the hallway with a nurse by her side. Other patients smiled at her as she passed. Elderly men in wheelchairs, a teenager with a bandaged arm. For the first time, Melissa realized she wasn't invisible. Every step hurt, but it also meant she was still here, still hers. As she turned back toward her room, she saw Dr. Harper talking to a woman in a gray suit. He caught her gaze and gave a reassuring nod. That woman, she later learned, was from social services. That evening, Greg appeared again, ignoring the no visitors sign. He pushed into her room with a bouquet of lilies, the same kind she used to love before they made her nauseous. "Look who's awake." he said cheerfully. "You look good, honey." Melissa stared at the flowers, then at him. "Why did you increase my doses?" she asked quietly. His smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "Dr. Harper said—" "Oh, Dr. Harper said," Greg snapped, his voice rising. "That man is obsessed with you. He's filling your head with lies." Her heart pounded. "He saved my life." Greg stepped closer, his voice lowering to a whisper. "And he'll ruin it if you keep listening to him." "Please leave," she said. "You don't mean that." "I do." At that moment, Dr. Harper entered the room. "Mr. Turner," he said calmly, "you need to leave, right now." Greg turned, anger flashing across his face. "You can't keep me from my wife." "Yes," Harper replied evenly. "I can, and I will." He gestured to security waiting by the door. Greg's words turned into noise, shouts fading as he was escorted out. Melissa sank into her pillow, trembling, half in fear, half in relief. Harper sat beside her, quiet for a moment. "You're safe now," he said softly. She looked at him, her voice breaking. "Why does it still hurt?" "Because healing isn't the end of pain," he said. "It's learning to stop mistaking it for love." That night, as rain fell outside, Melissa whispered to herself, "No one gets to choose for me again." And for the first time in years, she slept through the night without dreaming of weight on her body or her soul. The first days after Greg's removal felt strange. Not peaceful yet, just empty. Melissa's room, once filled with his perfume and presence, now smelled only of antiseptic and tea. But that emptiness, Dr. Harper said, was the space where healing would start. Each morning she watched the hospital lights flicker on, one by one, as nurses made their rounds and patients murmured in their sleep. There was comfort in the routine. Temperature check, blood draw, breakfast tray. Simple, predictable. For the first time in years, her body was on her own schedule. Dr. Harper arrived early one morning, holding a clipboard and a small smile. "Good news," he said. "Your glucose levels are stable, your heart rate's improving, and we're taking you off IV fluids today." Melissa looked surprised. "Already? You're stronger than you think." She exhaled, then asked quietly, "What happens now?" "To him?" Harper hesitated. "There'll be an investigation. The hospital's legal department is handling it with the state medical board and law enforcement." She swallowed hard. "He'll hate me for it." Harper met her eyes. "You don't owe him your silence anymore." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "That's the hardest part. I got so used to being quiet." Later that day, Harper joined a meeting with the hospital ethics committee. Papers spread across the table, charts, toxicology reports, handwritten notes. Dr. Patel, the senior physician, frowned. "So you're saying the husband manipulated her medication?" "Yes," Harper said. "The injector showed repeated overrides of dosage limits. He controlled her meals and timing. It was deliberate." Patel sighed. "We see it with insulin sometimes, or opioids. But GLP-1s, that's new." "It's still the same story," Harper replied. "A person using medicine to control another human being." The room fell silent. Patel finally spoke. "File it under medical coercion and report it. And Dr. Harper, good work. You probably saved her life." That evening, Melissa was transferred to the recovery wing. Brighter walls, softer lighting. Her new roommate, an elderly woman named Margaret, had a broken hip and endless stories. "I heard about you," Margaret said cheerfully. "The teacher who fainted." Melissa smiled weakly. "That's me." "Well," the old woman said, "we all fall for something. The trick is standing back up without holding someone else's hand too tight." It was meant as a joke, but Melissa felt the truth in it. In the following days, Harper visited less often, not because he didn't care, but because he wanted her to see she could do this alone. He watched from a distance as she began to walk again, eating small meals, keeping a journal. In the notes, she wrote things like, "I can choose when to eat. I can decide how I feel. I am learning to be my own permission." One afternoon, Harper found her sitting in the hospital garden. The wind rustled the trees. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and antiseptic, the scent of life and medicine colliding. "You look better," he said. "I feel lighter," she replied. "Physically or emotionally?" "Both." They sat in silence for a while, watching the nurses walk by with clipboards and coffee cups. "Dr. Harper," she said suddenly, "why did you help me?" "You could have just filed the report." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Because medicine isn't only about treating bodies. It's about seeing the people inside them. And you were disappearing in plain sight." Melissa looked down, tears filling her eyes again, but this time they weren't from pain. "I didn't realize how invisible I'd become until someone noticed." That night she wrote a letter, not to Greg, but to herself. It began, "Dear Melissa, you don't owe anyone your body, your time, or your silence. The person you were is gone. The person you're becoming deserves space to breathe." She folded it and placed it under her pillow. Sleep came easily that night for the first time in years. 2 weeks later, Harper submitted his final report. Case 214B, Melissa Turner, recovery ongoing, emotional trauma acknowledged. Recommended for outpatient therapy and supervised rehabilitation. Patient demonstrates strong will and insight into her condition. Prognosis, good. He paused before writing one last line. Sometimes medicine can't fix what control breaks, but kindness can start to rebuild it. On her last morning in the hospital, Melissa stood in front of the mirror, buttoning her shirt. She was thinner, yes, but her reflection felt new in a different way. Her shoulders no longer slumped. Her eyes no longer avoided their own gaze. Harper appeared at the door. "Discharge day," he said. "I don't know if I'm ready." "No one ever is," he said gently, "but you'll find your way." She took a breath, looking at the world beyond the window. Sunlight, trees, motion. "I guess it's time," she whispered. "It is," he said. As she left the room, the monitor behind her still beeped softly, a reminder of what almost ended and what finally began. 6 months later, the hospital garden looked different in spring. Greener, louder, alive. The same wind that once carried sirens and fear now brushed softly against leaves and laughter. "Doctor." Harper stood near the entrance, flipping through a patient report, when a familiar voice called out behind him. "Dr. Harper?" He turned, and for a moment he didn't recognize her. Melissa Turner. She was standing there, a light jacket draped over her shoulders, sunlight catching strands of her auburn hair. Her face was leaner, her posture straighter. The fatigue that used to cling to her eyes was gone. In its place was something new. Calm confidence. "You look," he began, then stopped. She smiled. "Different?" He laughed softly. "Yes, in a good way. I'm eating right, walking every morning, teaching again," she said. "I even volunteer here twice a week, the patient support group." He raised an eyebrow. "Really? They call it the healing table. It's just a few of us talking over tea, but it helps." "I'm sure it does," he said. She looked around the garden, taking in the familiar white walls and bright tulips. "This place used to feel like a cage," she said quietly. "Now it feels like where I started breathing again." Inside the volunteer hall, a group of women sat in a circle, patients recovering from chronic illness, depression, metabolic disorders. Melissa stood in the center, holding a cup of coffee with both hands. "When I came here, I thought being sick meant being weak," she said. "But sometimes sickness is just the body's way of saying, I'm tired of being ignored." The room was silent. One woman wiped her eyes. Another nodded slowly. "I used to think losing weight would fix me," Melissa continued. "But I was wrong. I didn't need to lose weight. I needed to lose control. His control." She paused, her voice steady now. "And when I did, the rest followed." Later, Dr. Harper sat in his office, filling out paperwork when he heard a knock. Melissa stepped in, carrying a folder. "I wanted to drop this off," she said. "The recovery data from the group. It might help your research." He took the papers, scanning the graphs and notes. "You've been tracking blood sugar, mood levels, even meal patterns." She shrugged, smiling. "Teacher habits die hard." He nodded appreciatively. "You know, you could present this at the community health conference next month." She laughed. "Me, standing in front of doctors? Why not?" You've lived what we're all trying to understand. Melissa looked down for a moment, then met his gaze. Maybe I will. As she turned to leave, he called after her. Melissa? She glanced back. I never asked. How much weight have you lost? She smiled, eyes soft. About 30 pounds. He nodded. You must be proud. I am, she said. But not of the number, of the peace that came with it. Outside, she walked across the parking lot, the sun dipping low behind the hospital. She passed the space where the ambulance had once brought her in half-conscious. Now she walked past it on her own, each step steady, deliberate, free. At the far end of the lot, she paused and took a deep breath, looking up at the open sky. Her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I had to become less to survive, but I only needed to become me. A breeze lifted the edge of her jacket. She smiled and kept walking, her shadow stretching long and light across the pavement. She lost weight, yes, 30 pounds of numbers on a chart. But she also lost fear, silence, and the invisible hands that once decided how she lived. What she gained was something medicine can't measure. Freedom, choice, and the quiet strength of being her own cure.